I'm Shelley Blanton-Stroud, welcoming you to Stories on Stage Sacramento. We've radically changed in the past 6 months what we think it is to be on stage in Sacramento, and we're really proud of what we've been able to do here. No less proud than we have been than for tonight for us to feature the work of a wonderful local author, Erika Mailman, and her book, oh my gosh, I left it, where did I set it? Murderer's Maid. Oh, there it is in front of you with Dorothy. So before we get started, I'll just be trying to fix some technological things, but I wanted to say thank you so much for coming. We're so excited that you're here, and I'll be having my eyes on the chat, and we'll be sharing questions you might have as we go along. And before we get to Erika and to our actor, Nicole Berry, let me introduce some Stories on Stage people who will be asking questions and discussing. So first, let me say to all of you, this is what I like to call Bridget's Broom, my cocktail in honor of The Murderer's Maid, The Murderer's Maid. So first, let me introduce Dorothy Rice, and you're gonna go in detail about people, but would you just say hello so your picture pops up?
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for coming.
Okay. And what is your drink tonight, Dorothy?
Well, it's cranberry juice and sparkling water.
Okay. Well, it looks awfully bloody at any rate. Sue Staats, Stories on Stage's Sue Staats. Say hello so we can see your face.
Hi, everybody. Welcome. And my drink tonight is called Lizzie's Poor Excuse, which because it's just it's tonic water, no gin, and pear juice. And a pear is very important in the story, and of course, when you buy the book, you will know why. But anyway, welcome, and I'm glad you're all here. Cheers.
Cheers. Jessica Laskey, our casting director and board member. Say hello.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. And last but not least, our actor and author. So first, wave hello, Erika. You're going to get a fuller introduction in just a few minutes. Erika Mailman. Okay, Nicole Berry, our actor. Say hello. Great.
Howdy.
Howdy. All right, so let's turn to Dorothy Rice now, and she will lead us through the evening.
Great. Thank you, Shelley, and so great to see everyone. First, I thought it might be helpful just to real quickly give you a rundown of the agenda so you know what to expect and, aren't sitting there saying, well, when's this going to happen? First of all, I'll introduce Erika in more detail. Sue and I are going to ask her a few questions just to sort of prime the pump of thinking and a little background on The Murderer's Maid. Then Jessica will introduce our performer for the evening, our actor. Be thinking if you have questions and stuff, throw them into the chat. After the performance, Nicole and Erika may want to talk a little bit about the experience of having your work read by an actor. It's something that writers don't that often get to experience, a performance of this kind. Then we'll open it up to your questions and comments about the performance and then say thank you. So if you have any burning questions right now about anything, just throw in the chat and I'll do my best to keep an eye there, as will Shelley. And with that, I will introduce Erika Mailman, whom I've never met in person, so it's such a pleasure to meet you virtually.
It's a pleasure to meet you.
Erika, our featured author, grew up in Vermont and attended Colby College in Arizona, where she got her MFA in poetry, which is a great background for writing horror. I know it is. Might be timely to mention that while in Tucson, she also tended bar one summer. Her interest in mixed drinks didn't end there. I'm hoping that after the intro, she'll share the recipe for Lizzie's alibi, with us, a cocktail best paired with her chilling award-winning novel, The Murderer's Maid, which I just read and loved, read over a few evenings, so it's definitely a page turner and a little bit scary. In addition to The Murderer's Maid, which we'll be hearing the excerpt from, she's published several other novels, including The Witch's Trinity, which was a San Francisco Chronicle notable book of 2007, and a finalist for a Bram Stoker Award. And if you aren't horror aficionados, that is like the premier award for that genre. So that's a very big deal. Erika is also a prolific journalist with an impressive list of publications you can find on her website on topics with a range that kind of astounded me, from travel to the Jonestown Massacre to parenting. I mean, all over the map, and doing a wonderful job. And as if that weren't enough, she's taught an online novel writing course for many years and continues to do so. And you can find information about how to enroll in her class, how to buy her books on her website, which is the very easy to remember erikamailman.com, right? So with that, before we jump into our questions, maybe you want to give us that recipe in case someone is moved to reach over to their bar, which is probably right there, and mix up a drink.
All right. So much. Yes, when I was in Tucson, just for one summer, I tended bar, and I always think mixed drinks are fun. And so this is called Lizzie's Alibi. I invented it earlier today. So it's a gin and tonic, but it has a splash of Cointreau and a little bit of pear juice. You can see my garnish here, because Lizzie's alibi was that she, while the murders were happening, she was upstairs in the barn on the property eating pears. And then she also later said she was up in the barn finding metal screens to fix a window screen. And then her third alibi for the same time period was she was up in the barn looking for lead to make a sinker for a fishing line. So it was not an airtight alibi. And so let's all drink to her victims, because I'll talk about that later. But anyway.
Wow. I didn't realize you invented Lizzie's Alibi. So that's even more amazing. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a drink based on a real historical thing. And I just want to share, because I'm kind of dorky, a lot dorky. This is my coronavirus drink coaster. So
whoa. Yeah.
We're in a pandemic, so
great.
Do as you can.
Great. Now we'll ask Erika just a few questions, beginning with Sue, and then we'll dive into that performance that I'm sure you're all waiting for.
Sure.
Well, hi, Erika. I'm so glad to finally see your face. It was fun interviewing you for the blog, and I so enjoyed your book. And I wanted to ask you something that you've been asked a lot before, but I think the audience, it's information the audience might not have and might want to know. So I want to know, so everybody knows about Lizzie Borden, and I'm wondering why you chose to write about something that is so well known, and also why you chose to focus instead on Lizzie on her maid, Bridget.
Great question. So I grew up on the East Coast in Vermont, and the Lizzie Borden murders took place in Massachusetts in 1892. And they're still talked of in lore. And in fact, in playgrounds, kids are literally still jumping rope. Maybe they aren't now, but in my childhood, they were still jumping rope to that rhyme about Lizzie Borden took an axe, gave her mother 40 whacks. When she saw what she had done, she gave her father 41. Actually, I think I reversed them. But so anyway, I'd always been fascinated by this case. And being of kind of a dark and morbid sensibility, it really intrigued me that this very brutal murder had been accomplished by a woman in a time period where the jury basically acquitted her for being a woman. You know, women were just not seen as somebody who could heft a tool and attack with that kind of brutality. And she was a church volunteer and kind of a stately middle-aged woman. And it just didn't seem possible that she could have done these murders of her father and her stepmother. And she was in fact acquitted at her trial a year later. And it was the trial of a century, and people from, reporters from newspapers all over the country sent people to sit in the courtroom and report on it. Like if you look at any newspapers from major cities, they were carrying that news of the small, Massachusetts trial. And then I decided to tell the story from Bridget's point of view for a couple of reasons. One is that I hadn't seen a version of the story that focused on Bridget before. And it's pretty astonishing. You know so much about Lizzie and her stepmother and her father, but very few people have talked about the fact that there was one other person in the house that day who was the Irish maid, Bridget Sullivan. And I thought I would love to kind of use that back door to talk about the case and focus attention on a woman who was discounted at the time because of her subservient role and also because of her Irishness in a time period when the Irish were not thought well of. And so that was a starting point. And then it also led me, there's a contemporary storyline as well, and that lets me draw a parallel between how the Irish were treated back then and how people are treated today as immigrants from Mexico, Central America. The same sort of discrimination is taking place against those people today. So I thought, well, that's a pretty good mirror of our times, and it's an evergreen story.
Yeah, fascinating. Yeah, I really appreciated how you wove in the immigration issues. So definitely, without calling them that, of course, but both the Irish from our history and now, as you say, Mexico and Central America. I have had in the chat, I don't know if you've noticed, people are noticing your earrings. You want to lift your hair for a minute?
These are my hatchet earrings that my publisher gave me, and at different events when the book launched in 2017, we would give away the earrings or to book clubs and things like that, which
Those
was
are amazing.
Jealous.
Those are
I was
amazing.
looking for an emoji hatchet today. Couldn't find one.
Great idea. A hatchet emoji. And I loved hearing the jumping rope rhyme. I hadn't heard it since I was a little kid. And I remember it. I grew up in San Francisco and we used to do that, but I hadn't heard it in probably 50 years. So thank you for that memory. Another question, as part of your research, we learned from your conversation with Sue Staats, you spent the night at the Lizzie Borden B&B, and you actually slept in Bridget's room, right? In the maid's room. So I'm wondering what you can tell us about that experience, any spooky feelings, and also what about Maplecroft, the house that Lizzie moved to after she was acquitted, even with all those flimsy alibis?
Love that, flimsy alibis. So yes, the Lizzie Borden house is a murder-themed bed and breakfast. And so you can spend the night there and get an extensive tour. You can also do a day tour without spending the night, but the night tour goes to more places in the house. You get more access and a longer and more in-depth tour. And are there any folks here from the Lizzie Borden house? Some of the docents have been, I've befriended them and they were helpful in the research process, tracking down certain details and stuff. And they're really wonderful people and they're very passionate about this case. And one of the things I just wanted to very quickly say, because I can see, wow, we're already at 20 past.
No worries.
This book, The Five, it just came out. This was my birthday present. I requested it. It's a book about the victims of Jack the Ripper, the 5 women. But what's beautiful about this book is that it doesn't talk about their murders at all. It's a biography of each woman before she was murdered. And one of the things that we think we always know about those women is that they were prostitutes. And this author has done a great job, Hallie Rubenhold, digging into their stories and finding only one of them had occasionally been selling sex. And all the other 4 were women who, because of their circumstances in life, were sleeping on the street, homeless. And that was why they were vulnerable to this attack. And I saw a real parallel in what I was trying to say about the Lizzie Borden case, which is that there's so much attention focused on Lizzie and murder and she got away with it. And we tend to forget Andrew and Abby, who died in just incredibly brutal ways. And, there are people who drink their morning coffee out of a mug that has the crime scene photographs on it. So like you're looking at Andrew's brain, and if you're left-handed, you're looking at Abby on the floor upstairs. And I really wanted to explore, and I was able to do that through the contemporary timeline, why is it that we're so fascinated with murder? And why can we be so flippant about it and not consider how we would feel were we on that mug, 150 years into the future? So I really wrestled with a lot of these ideas. And yet, having said all that, I was very interested in what the house was like. And I'm really glad I went, because I don't think my book would be half as accurate as it was because I went to go and see the house. Is it haunted? Many people say it is. I did not have a haunted experience. I did have a terrible, terrible nightmare though. And it was related to the house. It was a dream about a closet in one of the other rooms in the attic. And I think I talk about that in the author's note to the novel. But yeah, there are lots of people there at the house setting up cameras to do their paranormal filming. It was a very interesting tour, very eye-opening.
Wow.
Did I answer all your questions? Oh,
Yeah,
maybe.
absolutely. That was fascinating. And yeah, you mentioned in the book the scene where one of the characters goes there, and the dreadful gift shop with the mug and the different things kind of glorifying murder, as you say. And I love the parallel between the book you just read and the focus on Bridget as an unsung character and a very important character that I think we can relate to. Request to see your ring.
Oh,
what is your big ring?
It's just, okay. It's literally a bent fork. The tines are bent around this little blue stone. I got it from a street vendor in San Francisco like 15 years ago, and I love it.
So it's not a Lizzie Borden artifact.
No, it's not a bent up hatchet.
It looks spooky. It looks spooky. Okay, and I know we want to get into that performance.
Yes.
We, of course, have other questions because we're always full of questions. We'll save them, and maybe some of the audience members will key off those same questions. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jessica to give a good introduction for our actor.
Sure thing. So, hello everyone. Thank you for coming. Can everybody hear me okay? Okay, perfect. Excellent. So Nicole, actually on the blog, along with Sue's interview with Erika, is an interview with me with Nicole. So if you're interested in learning more about Nicole's background, she's a really fascinating person. So I encourage you to look at that interview, because it talks a lot about sort of how she got into the Bridget character, her voice, all of that. So I won't go into that here because you can read that on the blog. But I will say that Nicole is a multi-talented California-based actor and writer. She's been recognized for her work both on stage and on screen. And actually this year she received a certificate of outstanding achievement from SARDA, which is the Sacramento Area Regional Theater Alliance, for her rendition of Sonia in the comedy play Vanya and Sonia and Masha and Spike. And that was at the stage at Burke Junction in Cameron Park. And she's performed all over the region. She's performed with EMH Productions, Imagination Theater, Free Fall Stage, and she's also a film actor. So she's participated in film projects for the Sacramento 48-Hour Film Festival. I'm also reading, which is probably why you can see my eyes moving, a place called Sacramento, the Sacramento Film and Music Festival, and the Sacramento 10x10 Film Challenge, which she actually won Best Actor for her work in the movie Departure. And you can find out a lot of information on her website, which is nicoleberry.info. So make sure you do .info. She's got clips. She's very, very multi-talented, as you'll see. She's not nearly so dour in real life as she will be as Bridget. She's just wonderful. And she can be seen in the upcoming release of the crime feature film First Date. And then she's also written several short screenplays and one-act plays that are going to be up for public viewing in 2021. So we're very excited to have her. And this will actually be a video of her reading. She is on with us, as you saw, but it'll be a video of her reading because we wanted to make sure that the Wi-Fi didn't do anything crazy. So what you're going to see is actually a video, but then she'll be able to talk to us afterwards because she is on here live with us now. So thanks. Enjoy.
This is an excerpt from The Murderer's Maid by Erika Mailman. Bridget, August 4th, 1892, the day. Bridget lay atop her quilt, sweating. She was exhausted from her earlier bout of nausea and cleaning all of the home's windows. Through the open window, she heard the cart traffic from both 2nd and 3rd streets, and the rare wind rustling the hickory leaves. Birds were too hot to add much to the muggy malaise, and donated only an occasional shrill whistle to the tune Fall River sang today. She ran the back of her hand over her damp forehead and wiped it on her chest, letting her eyes drift closed. She was almost asleep when the church bells began to ring the hour of 11 o'clock. Her eyes bolted open in startlement, only to close again before the bell finished tolling. It was too hot to do anything but let dreams etch a coolness onto her wits. The air was heavy, and her lungs cloyed with it, making breathing a pleasant challenge when one's entire self was devoted only to its successful carriage. Her face slackened, and her hands, usually so busy, lay dormant on her chest. A replica of the knight in effigy on his tomb that Miss Lizzie had so enthused about after her European tour. Like a wisp of smoke drifting in with her breath, dreams began to form, washing her brain with the visage of her mother. The broad, proud face with the easy smile, and the very woman climbed the ladder to the loft, her skirts twitching as she stepped. And at the hem of her gown, Bridget saw a limb of blood, as if her mother had dragged her skirts through an abattoir. In shock she woke, but it was not the skirts bringing her back to the cramped attic room, broadsided by sunlight. It was a voice at the bottom of the stairs. Miss Lizzie was calling loudly, but not screaming. "Maggie, come down!" "A second Gomorrah," muttered Bridget, astonished to hear such crass words emerge from her mouth. Words she'd heard stewards utter on the steamer here, or sometimes rough men emerging from the pub, but never her. "What is it now?" Feeling the lurch of abruptly being snatched from the dream world, still trying to retain some vestige of her mother, oddly stepping through such a pall, she rolled to the side of the bed and stood, temporarily dizzy. "What's the matter?" she called. "Come down quick. Father's dead. Somebody came in and killed him." Bridget straightened, threw open her door, and pummeled down the stairs, stumbling and missing one in her clumsiness. Miss Lizzie stood at the bottom. She gave a reflexive smile to Bridget, which Bridget, with horror, felt herself return before she mastered herself. "How is this, Miss Lizzie?" "Father is dead. Someone killed him." Miss Lizzie's face knit into concern, but in a detached way. Bridget noted there was unearthly calm radiating from her. "For all the world, where is he?" Bridget cried. "In the sitting room." Propelled by instincts to verify such an atrocious report, Bridget brushed past her and took 3 steps into the sitting room before her mind could catch up. The room was dark. The blinds were drawn, hiding the handiwork of Bridget's earlier ministrations at the windows not even an hour ago. The view of the side of the Kelly house, with its windows sometimes giving a view of Mary Doolin at her duties, was covered. Mr. Borden reclined on the sofa in a posture Bridget had seen 100 times. He slumped sideways, and his feet rested on the floor so as not to mar the horsehair sofa with whatever refuse another part of the horse may have left on his Congress boots. but she couldn't get a good glimpse at his face. Why did Miss Lizzie think him dead rather than merely napping? She continued into the room, calling, "Mr. Borden." The high-strung chit was mistaken. Surely Bridget saw the rise of his chest as he slept. But she still couldn't see his face. Taking a few steps closer to await the pale oval to appear in the darkened chamber. But his hands... Well, his hands were there, accounted for, touching his stomach, gleaming against the dark of his vest. If she could see his hands, why couldn't she see his face? Another step nearer, and she screamed. She discerned the jut of his chin, but all above that was concave. His jaw was an open drawer holding a tinker's assortment of teeth and cartilage. His head had become a bowl in which dislocated teeth floated. There was no rhyme or reason. That vestige of a face, no nose to anchor the symmetry of eyes, to hover over the lips. The elements that constituted his countenance had been rearranged like keys thrown into a jailer's jumble. Eyebrows and cheeks were completely absent in that skinless structure, and in abject, discouraged languor, Mr. Borden looked at his own undoing from one eye split in half and left dangling askew, inches from where nature had first ordained its place, and the other eye was missing, lost in the clotted stew. Bridget screamed again, but her body wouldn't move. "Bridget, go get Dr. Bowen," said Miss Lizzie. Bridget looked at her, standing in the doorway. The order broke her paralysis, and she dashed past Miss Lizzie, out of the room. She let the screen door bang behind her, and she picked up her skirts to run to Dr. Bowen's house across the street. She couldn't control the short bursts of shrieks that bubbled up from her throat, nor seemed to close her mouth in a rictus. Like a tormented dog, she showed her teeth. A doctor, Bridget thought hectically, more like an undertaker. Yet perhaps Dr. Bowen could do something, supply the elixir of life back into those stolid lungs and sew up the face so grievously disordered. Dusty 2nd Street didn't know about the murder, but held up its carriage traffic for her, somehow slowing the potato cart down by Spring Street and the tossing bay's head at Borden Street. She stumbled over the curb on the other side, racing up to Dr. Bowen's door. She pounded at his door, still holding her skirts up, until she realized, in her bewildered state, she had hoisted them to knee length and abruptly let them go. "Hello?" Mrs. Bowen appeared at the door, eyebrows raised at the vehemence of Bridget's knocking. "Oh, please, Mum, I need the doctor to come with me." "Well, he's away now. Is Mrs. Borden's stomach worse?" For a second, Bridget's mind went to forbidden territory, in which Mrs. Borden was endangered, but she remembered Lizzie had told her she left the house earlier. It's Mr. Borden. He's been murdered. He's at the house. Oh, what will I do? I'm to fetch Dr. Bowen." Mrs. Bowen's trembling hand went to the front of her gown, shot through with lace and georgette. "Dear girl, I will send for him." Without acknowledgement, Bridget ran back across 2nd Street, this time forgetting to raise her skirts at all. It didn't matter. What was mud on one's hem when a man's skull had been plundered like an egg? She headed for the side door and then stopped short as it occurred to her to try for Dr. Kelly on the other side. He was a doctor, but he was Irish. It wouldn't do. And equally unlikely was Dr. Chagnon, the French-Canadian whose backyard abutted the Borden barn. Stumbling along the side of the house where, not so long ago, she had balanced her ladder and cleaned the windows, she still felt the half-shrieks shuddering up through her body. It was too awful to leave Miss Lizzie alone in the house with the monstrous thing Mr. Borden had become, and she thought as she mounted the 3 exterior steps, the killer might yet be in the house. "Miss Lizzie!" she cried as she entered, but she needn't have raised her voice. She was right there in the entryway, waiting. "Where's Dr. Bowen?" she frowned. "He's away on another call. Mrs. Bowen will get him. Oh, Miss Lizzie, let's away to the yard. It's not safe here." I'll hover here by the door. It's all right. Let me think. Oh, it's so hard to think. Poor father. I think you'd best get Miss Russell for me. I don't think I can stay here alone. You know where she lives?" "Yes, ma'am." Yes, miss. Oh, do go quickly. Will you not step outside? The murderer may yet lurk. Just go, Maggie. I need Miss Russell. She obeyed, grabbing the shawl and hat, relieved to leave the house, but puzzling at the calm replies Miss Lizzie gave. Borden Street, named for her employer, was only a few blocks away, but Bridget was already ragged with running, her lungs making pained work in her chest. She battered at the door of the small home with its brown shutters. Why, Maggie, what is it? Said Miss Russell when she answered the door. Oh, you must come at once, Mr. Borden. He's been murdered, and Miss Lizzie requires you. Miss Russell's mouth dropped open in a loud gasp. Oh, surely I'll come. Give me a moment to change my dress. Bridget stood at her closed door, appalled, as she waited. Her house dress wasn't as plain as all that. The door opened, Miss Russell seized her hat from the small stand visible in the hallway and stepped outside. Bridget wanted nothing more than to run, but with the sedate older woman at her side, she slowed her steps to a mere bustle as they half-trotted back toward the house. What happened to Mr. Borden? I came downstairs at Miss Lizzie's calling and went into the sitting room where he lay on the sofa, and his head... She trailed off, unwilling to state the specifics of what she'd seen. Yes? His head's not... It's not there, said Bridget. He's been beheaded? Miss Russell stopped walking. Oh, no. He's been, I don't know how to say, pounded or beaten. And he's for certain dead. Almost certainly in that state. If you were to rise, Bridget left unspoken the ill-formed thought that if Mr. Borden rose from that sofa with his head such a splatter of skull and blood, she'd kill him again herself. Oh, poor Lizzie. She visited me last night, and she was afeard of such a thing, and here it has happened. What do you mean? She said her father had been rude to so many that she was afraid someone might do something to him. She thought the house might burn down around all of your heads one night. But I've spoken out of turn. I'm so witless with worry, but it seems she was right, and he has paid the price for his discourtesy. Miss Lizzie said that. I can hardly countenance it. No, Mr. Borden ain't. Even yesterday, he said. He sent Dr. Bowen away rudely when he solicitously came by to check on his stomach. Oh, he did, but it was only because he knew he'd get better. 'Twas only a little food poisoning, and the heat making the milk sour before its time. Lizzie was upset. Oh, I shouldn't be telling you this. She thought this was just the latest offense of many, and that he would be brought low for his insolence. It seems that day has come. Well, I wonder at her, said Bridget. He seems no more insolent than any other, and does rudeness warrant himself being done so? Miss Russell shuddered. I've spoken what I shouldn't, she said. It's only because I'm shaken. Bridget pressed her lips into a seam, still able to feel the sting at being put in her place even at such a moment. Miss Russell had been speaking to her as if she were an equal, and then took back the confidence. The confidence is told in the ardor of alarm. Miss Russell started first for the front door, for they were back at the house, but Bridget pulled at her sleeve. The side door, I think, she said. They're in the kitchen. She didn't want to say it, but using the front door would put the corpse between them and Miss Lizzie. One or the other party would have to cross through the ill-fated sitting room to meet with the other. Inside the kitchen was a strange scene. The next-door neighbor, Mrs. Churchill, was there in near hysterics, yet Miss Lizzie stood motionless, tranquil, if not happy. She rushed to embrace Miss Russell. I'm so relieved. Thank you for coming. Oh, how could I not? It's been awful, Alice. He's in the sitting room. Bridget tells me he's dead. I believe so. And Mrs. Borden. She went out this morning. She had a note that someone was sick. Who? I don't know. And she hasn't returned? Oh, we should fetch her. Yes, but I don't know where to fetch her from, said Lizzie. Bridget, will you make us some tea to calm us? Bridget went to the scullery to fetch water, and as she came back, she heard a male voice amongst the ladies. Dr. Bowen had finally arrived. She came into the kitchen just as he prepared to see Mr. Borden's body. She almost wanted to warn him not to go, that the sight would never leave his eyes, but he was a doctor and had seen such things before, she reasoned. He staggered when he returned, pale, clutching at the table edge. "We should cover him," he said. "It's wrong to leave him so." Everyone turned to look at Bridget. "I should cover him?" she asked in a small voice. No, we wouldn't expect that, but will you get a sheet for me, a blanket or some such?" Bridget nodded. I can get some in from Mr. Borden's room upstairs." She took a few steps and stopped. "What if the killer remains upstairs?" "I'll go with you," said Mrs. Churchill. "Oh, I do thank you," said Lizzie. "I don't think my nerves could take a trip up the stairs." "We'll need the key," said Bridget. "The chamber's locked and the key's on the mantel in the sitting room." Dr. Bowen inhaled loudly. "The bedchamber is locked." "Indeed it is, sir. Might you get us the key?" To all of their amazement, he released a foul word. "I'm sorry, sir," said Bridget. "It's none of your doing, but I don't relish going back in there." He walked away and soon returned with the key. Bridget was certain he hadn't looked, for he couldn't have walked with such confidence back to them. She preceded Mrs. Churchill up the stairs. "Now, why is the bedroom locked and the key in the sitting room?" she murmured as they climbed. "It's the way of the household since last summer's break-in," said Bridget. She was relieved that the door was indeed locked, meaning no one could be inside, and applied the key. She cast a glance upward to her own continuing staircase. Not for all the gold in Ireland would she sleep there tonight. Inside the room, Mrs. Churchill cast a curious eye. "And where would we find the linens?" She didn't wait for an answer, and began opening drawers and cupboards. Bridget stood there aghast. She was relieved for the woman's presence, and would not have come to the room by herself, but she had never witnessed before the upper class's easy confidence, that drawers were theirs for the opening, that the right of entry that would get a maid fired was entirely excusable for them. "Ah, here we are." She took out 2 white sheets and nodded at Bridget to go back down. In the kitchen, Dr. Bowen and Lizzie were talking about Mrs. Borden. "I don't know, but that she is killed too, for I thought I heard her come in," Miss Lizzie was saying. "We should check upstairs." Bridget's heart pounded. "When did you hear her return?" "I'm sure I heard her. Someone, please go look upstairs." "But why would she be on the other side of the house?" Bridget asked. Everyone stared at her. She was meant to be silent, a silent servant, making tea and fetching linens without cowardice. "What do you mean, that side of the house?" "The upstairs does not connect through," said Miss Lizzie. "Bridget, won't you climb the front stairs and see if she is there?" "Why would she be in your rooms?" she asked stupidly. "She said she wanted to make up the guest room bed for my uncle," said Lizzie. "She went up with fresh pillowcases." "Maggie, I am almost positive I heard her come in. Won't you go upstairs to see?" "All alone, miss?" "I'll go with her again," said Mrs. Churchill. "Someone has to do it, and Dr. Bowen is reluctant. Let us go." "And I'll cover Mr. Borden's body, then return home to telephone for the police," said Dr. Bowen. Fortunate indeed that you have that modern convenience," said Mrs. Churchill, "so you won't be gone too long." "I will, of course, be quick about it. I'll wait until you two come back, though." Bridget and Mrs. Churchill minced through the dining room, skirting their eyes away from the open door to the sitting room, where Dr. Bowen flapped a sheet and wafted it down over Mr. Borden's corpse, as if he were a slender mattress. Bridget's mind was spinning. Miss Lizzie had said Mrs. Borden was out on the sick call, so when did she think she heard her return? After she had discovered Mr. Borden's body, or before? And why was no one wondering why she had not previously shown concern for Mrs. Borden? "I have a terrible feeling for Mrs. Borden," said Bridget under her breath. They were nearing the top of the front staircase, and she could see the door to the guest room was open. As her eyes reached the level of the floor above them, she saw directly underneath the guest room bed to what lay on the floor on the other side. It took her a moment to understand what she saw, even as Mrs. Churchill was screaming in her ear. She had never seen Mrs. Borden reclined, and certainly not face down on the floor. Her body was a large and formidable presence that took up the entire visual space beneath the bed, as if a large pile of lumpy garments had been thrust there. "Don't go further," said Mrs. Churchill. "She's for the doctor." But Bridget plugged on, needing to confirm. She reached the landing and walked into the guest room. The sweet Mrs. Borden, who had talked her out of quitting, who had wanted her stepdaughters to love her, lay on the floor half under the bed, half in the space between the bed and the dresser. By craning, Bridget could see a halo of blood encircling her head, like she was a terribly drawn saint in a Renaissance painting. Bridget clutched at her waist as she saw a braid lying nearby, completely severed, a byproduct of the assault that had opened up the woman's cranium. There was ignominy in how she had fallen, her hands helpless at her sides, her shoe soles upturned and small and vulnerable, the hobnailed shoes she wore only for work. "She's in her house dress," said Mrs. Churchill from the doorway. "She never went out on a sick call. She'd never leave the house in that dress." Petty. Bridget wanted to spit at her. Who cared what dress she wore and how humbled her final appearance? Mrs. Borden had been a good woman and done the best she could in a hard household, just as Bridget had tried to do. She understood why Mr. Bowen had wanted to cover Mr. Borden. It was unfair to regard these bodies from which the soul had fled, left to the miseries of flesh and asunder bone. She wished she had the second sheet in her hands right now to cover Mrs. Borden. Poor dear lady," she said. "I'm going back downstairs," said Mrs. Churchill, and Bridget left the foot of her mistress, where she had stood for just a few seconds in mute grieving. Dr. Bowen stood at the bottom of the staircase, face intense. "Is there another one?" he asked. "Yes," said Mrs. Churchill. "She's dead." A swarm of activity encircled the house, as if it were a beehive whose bees had brought acquaintances, uncles, cousins, friends, all to descend on the and describe panicked circles. The police came, and passers-by, and people crowded into the kitchen and even pressed their faces to the windows from outside. Mr. Borden's body was photographed where it lay, and then he was moved to a wicker autopsy table. "What will they do with that?" Lizzie asked Dr. Bowen as the folding table arrived, large and brown and strange. "They will put him on it to ascertain his time of death," he said simply. "And how will they do that?" "It is their stock and trade, and they will do it correctly." Lizzie nodded and asked no more, but Bridget, who was pressed into service as tea deliverer to the coroner and his men, saw Mr. Borden's slender, pallid frame stripped to the waist and a gigantic cut made in his chest. She saw that the wicker permitted air to circulate and blood to fall to the sheet below. She gagged at the sight. Had Mr. Borden not been cut and brutalized enough already? "Thank you," said the coroner, as he took a placid swallow of her tea. "Why must you cut him?" Bridget burst out. She hadn't meant to, but tears sprung to her eyes as the private man lay there vulnerable, exposed to so many eyes, and she felt shame for his scrawny frame. "We need to weigh his stomach," he replied gently. "It will help us establish the time of death." "But what of it?" she cried. "'Twas this morning, wasn't it not? Were it not?" "We'll do the same with Mrs. Borden," he explained, his eyes sympathetic despite his chosen profession. His voice was soft but firm, reassuring. "It's important to know the estate for estate purposes. Who preceded whom in death?" "Whatever for?" Estate purposes. She wiped away her tears, all for money, for bitter, worthless money. She understood in an instant, if Mrs. Borden died first, all her share in Mr. Borden's wealth reverted back to him, and then upon his death to his daughters. If, however, he preceded his wife in death, the estate would be split between his heirs and hers. But you'll never do this to her, will you? She asked, gesturing to Mr. Borden, who, although the sheet was pulled up to his waist, was clearly naked. I'm sorry, but we will need to. She'll be treated with the utmost respect. Bridget turned her back on him. Respect. When Mrs. Borden would be stripped in front of these men, a knife making incisions between her pendulous breasts. When she had no hair on her head, like a new shorn lamb, nothing left to decorate her plain face, how the living Mrs. Borden would have been shamed to have herself on display so. This autopsy were almost worse than the crime itself. She walked back to the kitchen, furious, sobbing. Miss Lizzie sat in a chair as Miss Russell wiped her forehead with a damp cloth and gave her soothing words. Bridget had slept as Mr. Borden had napped. He had likely never felt the blows, never departed the dreams in which he walked again with the vigor of youth, 2 wives by his side and his daughters happy, factories giving productive smoke to a sunlit sky and flawless textiles that any girl could afford from her dressmaker. She had been pulled out of dreams by Lizzie's call from the bottom of the stairs, but he had never departed that unearthly country, had earned permanent citizenship there where faces reassembled and the dead again smiled. Miss Lizzie, she asked abruptly, and Miss Russell's ministration stopped. Where were you?
That was wonderful.
That was amazing.
Yeah, thank you so much, Nicole.
Nicole.
Nicole, what do you have to say for yourself?
I'm trying to remember my favorite line, actually. It abutted the abutted line. There's so much alliteration in that line. And I recorded over it, and then at the end I went, oh, I said the line. It went fine. That was the thing I was worried about, was like this sentence that was nothing but alliteration.
I just want to...
It's spooky, right? It's really like, it's this beautiful, spooky way of describing things. The writing is really gripping, and it has a kind of authorial tone that also goes with the time period tone. And so performing it is pretty smooth, you know? It's not, there isn't a lot to trip on.
I was just spellbound, I was just sitting here like, I think you just delivered that so incredibly well. I just felt deep in that house, that claustrophobic house. I felt like I was there. I'm really, really happy with your performance of this chapter. I'm so thrilled. That was just amazing.
I'm digging it. That's what I'm here to do, is make you happy, Erika. That's about I want to say I have some empathy for all the viewers, because it stops at such a point, right? Am I right, everyone? Like, we stop there and we're like, what? So whatever excerpt, I don't know the rest of the book. I have not read the whole book. But as far as an excerpt choice, that's a really solid excerpt choice. I think it's very gripping, and where it leaves off is such a cliffhanger. Even though we know the story, that's what I love about you choosing to write with this subject matter, is we know what happened-ish, but we're still, I think, even more able to be entranced, because we think we know there's already solid ground, so we're willing to go whatever journey you've created for us. So bravo.
Bravo to you. Thank you so much. That was just, I can't even come up with vocabulary good enough for how I felt about that.
You? You should have a quick adjective list for me.
So true. Yeah.
I do. I need a thesaurus right now.
I
And
love
I like how you was that your choice to go black right after you said, Miss Lizzie, where were you?
I think I made a little smile. I think we ended it. It dropped off. My video dropped off right before that line was executed, which I thought was even better. Like, you didn't even get to see my face. You just get to hear the words. Where were you?
very dramatic cliffhanger. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is that you, Shelley, saying, I want Bridget to have another book? The Bridget character is amazing. And Nicole giving her voice was amazing. And yeah, we want more Bridget, Erika.
Oh, okay.
Is there a sequel in the works?
There isn't. I know the publisher made that decision that the subtitle is a Lizzie Borden novel, as if there's more to come. But it's meant to be a series. It's a standalone.
Wonderful. Well, I know we've run a little late, particularly with the issues we had with the video. Thanks everyone for being patient. If anyone has any questions, either raise your hand or better yet, type it in the chat. There are a lot of faces to look at. I'm sure Erika.
I wanted to specifically say thank you for tolerating the video. Oh, there's a terrible lag. Sorry, I requested to pre-record because I've had power outages and internet outages. So everyone that, was along for the ride, thank you so much for your patience.
Yeah, it was worth it. Yeah, so we have a question from Yolanda. What was the hardest thing to overcome when writing this story?
Okay, I have a good answer for that. I feel like there are so many people who are Lizzie Borden scholars and have devoted their life's efforts to like blogging and researching and doing so much deep work into this case that I was really nervous about getting it right. I mean, it is a work of fiction, and in fact, there's like kind of a big plot twist that I completely made up. But I wanted to make sure that for people who knew the case, it would fly for the most part. So I think that was my most worrisome aspect of writing it.
Yeah. Have you gotten any pushback from Lizzie Borden aficionados?
People are so nice.
They should be.
They're so supportive. I still, like even earlier today, I was on some of the Facebook groups and people are still asking questions and coming up with theories and stuff. It's really a charming engagement where people are coming in and asking questions and field them, and it's great.
Yeah, there's a lovely comment from Anara. I've read the book and so admired how you made us all newly interested in a story we thought we knew. Shelley says, me too, and absolutely, me totally too. That was the thing. We think we know. And as you said, it is fiction, and yet the story that we thought we knew is brought to life in a very different way than what we knew. So it's like a whole new story. So well done, very well done. And then there's a question, how do you explain the engagement of certain readers with a story over so much time? Yeah, why does it have sticking power? And this might go to something Sue had asked earlier and we didn't get a chance to go to our questions, is how was she viewed at the time after the acquittal? Did people believe she was guilty? I mean, is that the pervasive belief today? Is that part of why?
I think so. I think the acquittal is a big part of it because a lot of people think, well, she got away with murder, and that's pretty intriguing. And at the time, people would come into the train station, hop in a carriage, and go by her house, not the murder house, but the very beautiful, expensive home that she bought with her inheritance, Maplecroft. And they would narrate in the carriage, like, that's the house. And she would be inside listening to all this, and neighborhood kids would ring her doorbell and run away. And so she was definitely, targeted for people thinking had done it.
She was notorious.
Just now went on the market and sold within a few days for $890,000. It's a gorgeous, gorgeous home, fully decorated to the hilt with vintage furniture.
You think they'll turn it into another B&B?
They have wanted to, and in fact, the same people who owned the original B&B purchased it. Because of the pandemic, they had to let it go. But there are issues with ADA compliance with the Victorian household, with the staircases, and I also think some neighbors had not been happy with a business being in their neighborhood.
Yeah, it's a nice neighborhood, right?
It is a nice neighborhood.
It was, yeah. And I didn't mean to skip over Renee's question. Did Lizzie really give Bridget the note with her final payment expressing her disappointment in Bridget? So after the trial, right? Or was that part of your fiction?
I think I invented that detail.
It's a good one.
Many others are actually real, though. I mean, this case is like better than fiction. It's got its own like incredible things that took place that you couldn't make up.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to give anything away, so I don't want to ask about certain things, whether they're real or not real.
Can I ask a question of Nicole?
Yeah, of course.
You did such a good Irish accent, because it really felt like a Cork accent, and that's where Bridget grew up, in County Cork. Can you tell us a little bit about prepping for that?
Listening to interviews with Irish actors, predominantly. Although there are a couple of Irish films, like The Secret of Rowan Inish is a really good one. That one really illuminates how many different accents there are. I think we all forget, like, you know, what the world thinks of as an American accent is pretty much either a Californian accent or like a Texas accent. You know, there are really strongly different accents across the board. This is, you know, a giant nation, but Ireland's the same way. There are these pockets of really strongly different dialects and accents. And I wanted to go for something that was also, you know, that's fun. It's an obvious accent, but it's not difficult. Like, I don't know if anyone has watched the show Peaky Blinders, but it's either talking about things that you don't know what to say. Like, not only is it these really gritty voices, but it's really, really sloggy. Like the particular accent can be really sloggy.
Is
even though I think that was an Irish accent.
Peaky
So
Blinders.
yeah, selection process, and then a little bit of artistic, you know, license, and then say again.
Peaky Blinders is Birmingham.
It's Birmingham.
Yeah, Birmingham.
Yes, it's a Birmingham accent.
Yeah, England. But yeah, we stopped watching it because my husband.
Yeah, so that's what that was. I actually think that I have a tendency to slip slightly into something more chaotic.
Yeah,
it's a brilliant show.
Beautiful,
amazing actors.
I love it. I love
dark.
It. Yeah.
Dark.
Are you
Well,
drawn
we're on the note of dark. Yeah.
Yeah. Are you drawn to current crime stories as a writer, or is the past richer?
The past is richer for me, and maybe I appreciate that divide that makes you feel less icky about pursuing it. And certainly, not to talk about Jack the Ripper endlessly, but I think we glamorize a kind of like Victorian, you know, fog rising from the street and somebody with a bloody knife. Like it feels very different from knowing that somebody down the street got their throat slit.
Absolutely, absolutely. What are you working on? Are you going to do another horrific crime novel?
I'm pretty excited. My project right now is I'm team writing something with a writer friend, Vanitha Sankaran, and it's a YA kind of science fiction with some history, time slip stuff going on. So I've never written a book with somebody else before, and it's been a really fun process, and kind of using new skills, which I appreciate. I always want to do something different each time.
Yeah, and I understand you like graphic novels.
Oh yeah. Yeah. If I had any artistic ability, I would be doing graphic novels right now.
Yeah.
Really exciting thing to be doing right now.
Yeah, so we can't wait for your next book. Any other questions from the audience? Whoever, oh, they're hanging in there with you. So to give anyone a chance to, I see there's a question, but before we log off, I wanted to really thank everyone, encourage them to buy The Murderer's Maid and your other novels. We'll throw some links up in the chat to do that. We still have a workshop tomorrow with Erika on delving into the past, so kind of some of the research techniques she used, and you can still register for that. There is room, and we'd love to have you. So there's that. And of course her online workshop, which if I were a novelist, I would sign up for, but I'm mostly a memoirist. So there's a question from Jennifer. Thanking for the beautiful reading and the great discussion. Oh, and Yolanda asks, what's your favorite graphic novel?
It's by Raina Telgemeier, and it's called Smile. And it's kind of like a biographical look at her childhood with braces on a road trip with her annoying little sister. It's just a super good book. And Raina Telgemeier has done a lot of graphic novels that are wonderful, including retelling the Babysitter Club books.
Wow.
In a graphic novel format.
Oh, very cool. Yeah, it's amazing what you can do. And so Shelley tells us that if you scroll up, you'll find the link to the workshop. There's the link to Erika's workshop, erikamailman.com/maelstrom, which is your writing workshop, right? Looking forward to seeing Anara and others in the workshop tomorrow.
Yay, thank you.
Favorite quote from a language nerd. This is from Renee. The pewter eyes, the fearless stare, the body grown heavy with its steady diet of no remorse. Pewter eyes, yeah. There's a link to Capital Books, support Capital Books on K. They have gotten books in stock just for us, so.
Oh, nice, thank you.
Order some, they've got them there. And we do want to support, our local bookseller. And yes, the meeting is recorded. We'll post to the website, our YouTube channel, and share links via newsletter. If you're not signed up for a newsletter, you can go to our website and do so. Oh yeah, and Anara points out Capital Books will deliver as well in these strange times. It's a little weird to go to a store on the K Street Mall. It's kind of sad these days, but I went last week and it's a wonderful bookstore. What else? Thank you, lots of thank yous. Yeah, no, it really was excellent. And I just have to say, reading it, I think I went too fast. And so having the opportunity to hear that scene delivered by Nicole, I could really hear what she was referring to, not just the alliteration, but the adjectives and the descriptions, some of which are just the description of the body. I was able to sleep and get it out of my mind before. I'm not sure I'll be able to now. It's something else, really powerful. Yeah, they also ship. Yeah, yes, Nicole had an incredible cadence. Thank you. Absolutely, yeah. We could see Bridget and everybody, all the characters. Beautiful work, beautiful novel. I don't know if beautiful is the right word. Powerful novel, beautiful performance, powerful performance. Thank you everyone so much. We appreciate you being here. Any final words, Shelley or Sue or Jessica?
I had a fantastic time. Erika, what a great writer you are. I can't wait to read all of your work and to work with you tomorrow. And I want to reiterate that it is possible, if you still want to delve a bit into history, to register tonight for Erika's workshop tomorrow. And just this week, I started amping up in excitement about working with a pro who really knows how not only to do research, which you could look up somewhere else, but how to put the research in its proper place when you're writing something else. And The Murderer's Maid is one way to see how it's done, and tomorrow's the way to learn how it's done. I can't wait for tomorrow. Thank you, Erika.
Yeah.
Thank you, Erika.
Thank you so much. Thank you, all the Stories on Stage people. What an incredible program you put together. I'm so happy, and thank you, Nicole, and thank you everybody who came out for a cocktail hour on a Friday night.
Yeah, cocktail hour's not over.
That's right. Keep going.
Hope to
Free
see you
refills.
tomorrow. Thank you so much.